boys, I am joined by the mad scientist himself, Cian O'Brien, the full foot landing kinder addict, partial squat enthusiast, member of the GPP Three Amigos. Well, I suppose there's two or three. There's who's the fourth one?
Brandon McCarty.
Oh yeah. Is he coming? He's involved in all of them, is he?
He's involved in the ones in Oz anyway, at least, yeah.
Right. So if you haven't heard episode 1 with this absolute hooligan, go. Well, if you have 2.5 hours to spare in your life, go back and watch episode number 1. Myself and Cian, short story, long. We did sports science together.
Pseudoscience.
Pseudoscience together. I actually, after the last podcast, I got you to coach me. You got me from being absolutely atrocious at the cleans to being slightly less atrocious at the cleans. And we're after doing a wee clean session now. The goal with that was to try and get me to do the 100 kilos, but I'm still a shite bike with cleans.
I wouldn't say that. There's a few things, you kind of very major errors that you didn't know you're doing, I suppose. And then if you continue trying to just hammer away at doing something, to do something, you need to know that you need to do it, and to avoid doing something, you need to know that you need to avoid doing it. So when you're trying to use strategy A for problem B, you're kind of setting yourself up for a harder time of it. And you saw in that short time kind of how quickly we had improved a lot of things with your clean, from your start position to your front rack to transition around the knee to actually being able to stay up after the pull, continue elevating the barbell up. Massive strides. And
it fucking felt a lot better as well. I was dealing with a fucking wrist. My bitch wrist from jiu-jitsu was at me, and I tried doing, was it last week? Last week, and it just felt awful. I still got up 85, but 85 felt a lot better there. We'll get to 100.
Yeah, she did 85 for like 4 reps there.
Yeah, and it wasn't too bad. I think it was more. If I had got a few more attempts at 90, only for we were fucking running late for this podcast. But Sherlock, that's the way it goes now. We have a bet on. We'll set this in stone.
Oh no.
We'll set this in stone because you shook hands on it. So
I haven't actually shaken hands on it yet.
We did.
I don't think we've shaken hands on it.
We shook hands on it. Do you want to back out?
But no, I'm absolutely not backing out.
So the bet is, I'm going to get 110 kilo clean before he gets a dunk.
Easy money.
All
what, 100 euro?
100 euro?
Yeah.
Fair. All right, it's not so bad. So we'll see how this goes. As Cian said, he needs a fire lit under his arse to do something like that, and I think sometimes I do as well. So we'll push hard on that. But not gonna try and fucking rehash stuff we chatted about in the first chat. But we did speak about GA on the last podcast. So we'll cut straight into chatting about training when it comes to GA. Now, is it just this year that you trained the local GA team for? You were the S&C?
No, it's the last 2 years.
Last 2 years. So same as me with the local team. So strangely enough, I don't think too many people would end up doing S&C for their local club. It's
a lot harder when like the road is named after your grandfather. The pitch is Parky Breen as well. It's in the blood.
Yeah, well, first of all, how did you find training a team of people that you would have played with?
And I should still be playing with. It's a lot more challenging than people you don't know. I think you also see it I see it as well with the coaching seminars as well, where I brought Matt Watson over last year and nobody from the surrounding area of Carlow came. Yeah, people came from Derry, people came from Clare, Cork, all around Ireland, but no one are from the immediate area of Carlow. Where your hometown it's a lot harder sell because people don't really. I don't know if people are aware of what you can and can't do, and they probably see you as somebody else, or they just don't take you as seriously.
They see you as the person who would have known growing up, or like if you would have drank with that person, see you as the drink inside you. I don't mean specifically you. I mean, same with myself. Like a lot of the boys that I played with, the oldest boys in the team are the lads that I would have kind of played on minor teams with and stuff.
Yeah,
so
it's like really difficult when it comes to accountability there as well. I don't think people don't respect each other, but it's a different relationship. So it just makes things a little bit more challenging in a different way that you don't have to worry about. It just adds another layer of complexity to it.
Fucking wind trying to blow the door down here. Did you find at any point like I always find at the start you have to kind of, not that you have to stamp your authority, but you can't let things slide from day one, because you know these people, you know they kind of have a, you as much as you can't coach, you probably try not to coach them definitely, but you end up having to a little bit.
Yes and no. I don't think I've actually done that either, and I think I probably could have done that more, or probably should have done it more. I think there's a very strange blind spot or cognitive dissonance around training, where people think they're training when they're not. They're either testing, competing, or exercising. So they're not. Nobody actually. People have forgotten what training means and what coaching is, and it's very easy to see why when you look at how complex an invasion field sport like GAA is, because you've got so many different pieces of the puzzle that you can't break it down without putting it back together. And as soon as you stop playing your sport, it's no longer specific. It becomes more general. Everything needs to be done with the ball, or maybe your shooting drills are done unopposed, and then, oh well, why are we not getting scores? And it's like, all your shooting drills are done unopposed. You're like, anybody can kick a score when there's no one around them, when they've got time, when they've got time, when they've got space, they don't have a defender, when they don't have to win their own ball. All of these things need to be taken care of, and they need to be integrated back into it. But that's not to say don't do them. Like, I actually do like isolated practice, which seems to be controversial in the skill acquisition space.
And it even, like, to mix in a little bit of jiu-jitsu chat, but there's a big move for a few coaches pushing this more kind of, it's kind of like a game, the small-sided games version of like jiu-jitsu. It's not obviously not small-sided games because it's different, but a different approach to it, rather than, like, you know, breaking down a specific, like a movement or a submission or whatever and practicing that. I think there is a place for both.
100%. And even whatever you do, there's going to be limitations. Like, small-sided games are another great example. You can't just do small-sided games. Small-sided games reduce everything down as well. And if you think about the demands of a field sport and the size of a field where you're playing, that size allows you to get up to faster running speeds, which you can't do in a small-sided game. You're going to get more turns, more decelerations, more accelerations. You're probably going to get more contacts with the ball, more contacts with the opponent. But what good is that if the limiter is more physical? Like, maybe you're too weak that you can't hold off your opposition. Maybe you're too slow that you can't get to the ball fast. Maybe you're too slow you can't catch the attacker if you're defending, and so on.
I think thinking of the limiter is a good way to go about it, like on an individual basis for somebody trying to get better at GA, you know.
Yeah, I think it's it comes back to that thing about people forgetting what training is. Like, think about all of the different forms of physical activity where you have increased the demand for energy. So you've got physical activity where it's associated with the task you're trying to do. So you walk into the shop, whatever. Then you've got exercise. Not really too concerned with anything bar fun. Then we're going to ignore training for a second. We've got testing, so we're seeing what we can do. Then we've got competing.
Just on the testing, just to confirm, a Bronco is a test. It's not training.
Bronco is 100% a test. And I've been part of setups where we've done 2 Broncos in the one fucking session. We've done Broncos every single week. A Bronco is a test. It's not something you should return to weekly. You shouldn't even return to it monthly.
Boys, we'll go and do some short Broncos, but we'll do 10 of them.
And you probably shouldn't even use a Bronco, because where it's usually used is first sessions. You're like, oh, so we don't know where players are at, so we're going to test them. You're like, I'm sorry, what? So you've got 30 people. Some will have wintered a bit too well, which was the worst insult I ever got coming back playing hurling, well, Jesus, Cian, you've wintered very well. I didn't. The joke went completely over my head, and I was like, what was that about?
Was that when you had shin splints?
No, it was a few years beforehand. It was back in the DCU days.
Oh, fuck.
When I drank my way through the winter.
Class.
So some lads will have wintered very well in that sense, and then other lads will have trained throughout the winter. So you've got people with varying levels of fitness coming in and covering however many meters it is as quickly as they possibly can. If you add on top of the testing component there's also an element of competition. So you've got lads who will push themselves further than they would if they were doing that by themselves. So I don't think it's a good idea, because then if you add it in later on when you know that it's kind of appropriate, you're now sacrificing a productive session to test. You don't need, your training should give you all of the testing data you need, and then your performances on the field should probably do that too.
Do you think? Well, I know you do think this, but just to confirm it for the people because that don't know you as well. So you would abolish testing from GA teams then?
I'd abolish testing as it is. I wouldn't abolish testing. I think. So think about all of those 4 that I've touched on. I haven't even spoken about training yet. So you got physical activity, exercise, testing, and competing. I think all of them are incredibly important, and they'll lay the foundation for one another, and they're all necessary parts of it. But I think that it can be done more intelligently, and it can be it doesn't even have to be explicit testing. It can be part of your training. Like, so if training is specific, which it needs to be, there's going to be competing in it. And what's competing? Competing is a test, but you're not competing against yourself. You're competing against other. Or you're not testing. Wait, what did I say?
Rewind.
So you've got competing. So competing is you're testing yourself, but you're not testing yourself against yourself. You're testing yourself against other people. So in an ideal world, if you're competing against someone of equal or better ability than yourself, it will be a maximal test. But if you're competing against someone you're much better than, it's going to be less intense than testing. So it doesn't necessarily, you don't not test. It's part of the whole, and it comes as a byproduct of good, well thought out training.
So, example then of how you would. I sent across to you that we're going to talk about what would Cian do in the pre-season training.
I haven't even given a definition for training.
Yeah, we're going to get into it. We're going to get into it,
right.
And we're going to talk about then the difference between in-season training and pre-season. We'll get to that. But how would one walk testing in? What would testing look like then? Let's give an example of what a testing maybe that you would have done maybe over the last couple of years with the lads. Just one example. You can give us context if you need to, just before we move into training and the definitions.
So you can just if, and this is a big if, because a lot of people don't actually track their training. Your training should provide you most of the testing data, if you will. You know what you're doing in terms of your strength work, which is stupidly easy to track. But when it comes to some of the more specific elements like sprinting, it becomes a little bit more difficult. But even if you were to do an isolated sprint session, how accessible are things like timing gates? Not very. But what you can do is you could run the same distance. You could have it as races. So that's a very simple one that you can do. You can set up a camera as well that in the same spot, you know who's beating who. You can have leaderboards. But if you have that camera set up and you see how long it takes, you can play 2 videos back to back. So if you know that the whistle goes, that's when it starts. You can play 3, 4, 5 videos, depending on the size of the video, side by side by side. And you can see if players are getting faster, if players are getting slower, if players are sandbagging, which is an even bigger one. So that's one example, I suppose.
reason why I asked, I've kind of gone away from doing big testing days, and I would have been asked by managers before, oh, we do a testing day, we do a testing, you know, like 12 weeks down the line, and then, you know, like every 12 weeks after that. And I just, like, seen how pointless it ended up being. Either, like, you don't get the fucking same boys back, you don't get the same, they don't show up to every testing, so then therefore the testing is completely fucking pointless, you know.
I'm so disagreeable that I'm going to disagree with you, even though you're agreeing with me.
What are you disagreeing with me about then?
So there's more than one reason just to test as well, because there's something inherently and innately enjoyable about progress, and if you can't see the progress, you don't know you've progressed. But provided this comes back as again to even disagree with that point, that because it's done as part of the whole, you don't need to spend extra time on it, and it's already taken care of. So you're just like, oh well, 2 months ago you were squatting X, we only did 10 runs, now we're doing 15 runs, or we're covering more meters, or whatever it may be, so people can see the progress.
But you don't need to do a test in full
You don't
day
need
for
to
it.
do it, yeah.
That's the thing. Like, not that I don't test, but I don't do a full test in a day. You know, where we're taking the whole day out and going, doing upper strength, lower strength, sprint, jump. We're not doing it all in one day, but in different points throughout time we will be doing similar things again, and we will refer back to previous numbers. We will refer back to, we were doing a deserter squat. Now you're fucking 20 kilos more than you were 6 weeks ago. Boom.
I think it comes back to coaches thinking that's what they should do, but they don't. They lack the fundamental understanding of the whys, the hows, and the whats. They don't know what it is. They don't know why it should be done or shouldn't be done, and they don't know how to do it either. Because if you also think about that testing day where you do everything, each successive test is going to steal from the set test beforehand. And if you look at some of the tests, it's probably going to have a much greater negative impact on each successive test because of how hard those tests are.
Absolutely.
Let's do a 12-minute Cooper run. Oh, now we'll do some sprints. We'll do some speed endurance then. See how long.
At the end, we'll do like a deadlift max then.
Yeah, something along those lines. Or Nordics at the end of a session. God forbid.
Saucy. Right. So we've dug into the testing, train and define it, and we'll go from there.
Right. So training is simply goal-oriented manipulation of variables to do more over time. That's it. Needs to be progressive, needs to be specific, and you need to do more over time. Did I just do a...
But you said it twice, but I'm glad you did. If you fucking forgot about the more over time bit.
Yeah, more over time. And you do more over time by manipulating variables. And by manipulating variables well, you manage the amount of load on the system and then the fatigue that comes or doesn't come with it. Again, it goes back to fundamental misunderstandings about the process of training, where we're using broken science or science that we now know is faulty from the 50s, 60s, 30s, like general adaptation syndrome came from the 30s. Hans Selye and some rats. We're going to fucking stress these rats until they fucking die. We're going to pump them full of toxins. We're going to keep them running until they drop. And that's the fundamental, or that's the idea that underpins training.
Them rats needed David Goggins.
Them rats were David Goggins. They just kept going. Them rats were carrying the votes.
They stayed hard.
Yeah.
Until they died.
And we innately think of training as breaking something down to build it back bigger and stronger. You don't need to do that first part to break it back down, because if you break it back down, you start from scratch. That's a bit of an oversimplification, but you don't necessarily need to dig that massive hole. You can adapt without it. The heart adapts. The heart doesn't get any rest. Does your heart stop beating every night?
Not that I know of.
Yeah,
maybe after a skull of pints.
Probably.
But that not breaking down, and I don't know where the first person heard of stimulating and not fucking annihilating. Like, I think we all most people who get really into training come from a point of, we push real hard and we fucking do, like...
And there's a sense of accomplishment with that. And you get this massive rush of all these nice endorphins or whatever's happening underneath the hood. All these things that are inherently enjoyable. Maybe not in the moment, but afterwards you get this kind of like runner's high, and it's addicting. I've done it for years. Broke myself.
Absolutely, I still occasionally do it.
I still do it. Yeah, every now and again. But again, I'm a little bit less of an idiot the way I do it. I'm still a big idiot, but
Slightly less.
yeah.
If there was one thing to take away from this fucking podcast, that exact thing of not feeling like you need to break everything down in order to make progress is probably a fucking big takeaway. And I see it a lot with boys where it's now nothing against bodybuilding style training, because me loves some pumps, me loves them.
But even bodybuilding, it has gone that way as well. Where for years we thought that it was muscle damage, metabolite accumulation, and mechanical tension. Those were the three primary drivers of hypertrophy. And now, apart from tension, we don't really know.
No, but more so what I was leaning toward the bodybuilding stuff is that would have been heavy on, like, you know, go till failure, or like that would have been all the only way I would have trained. Drop sets, fucking like forced reps, all that sort of shit. Or then it was crossfitty style workouts where I'm going until I'm fucking puking on like the side of the gym, or I'm dripping in a sweat. For me, it was always that training of like pushing it to the extreme. That's what I thought I needed, you know. And I think most people are the same, in the sense that if they are like real go-getters, they want to make improvements, that's the area they're going to lean to. They're going to push hard in that sense, instead of maybe pushing a single rep on something a little bit heavier. They would rather do that 200 times. You know what I mean?
And that's it. If you just go kind of... We've got a lot better than sports science when it comes to our decision-making processes. Go back to Socrates and the Socratic method and just ask things like, the one rep is a good example. So, we're training strength. How do we measure strength? Well, we use load as a proxy for that. How much load can you use for 100 reps? Not very much. 50 reps, significantly more. 20 reps, significantly more. 10, significantly more. Then each rep below 10, you're going to be able to move significantly more load. Then in terms of the fatigue, after a set of 2, you're doing 100% more work than you would be after doing 1. You can accumulate a lot more work doing ones when it comes to your heavy strength work. Doesn't need to be done as we've done it traditionally, where it's 1 rep, 3, 4, 5 minute rest, 1 rep. You need 1 rep every 20 seconds, 30 total reps, it's 10 minutes. You've got 30 opportunities to practice. So that's 30 reps. What other ways can we accumulate 30 reps? We've got 10 by 3. Each set is 200% more work. 5 sets of 6. 6 sets of 5. 3 sets of 10. You're increasing the cost of doing that within those sessions. It just does not make sense.
The orthopedic cost.
That too. But like you're being robbed twice. So you're paying more and you're getting less. Like if you walked into a shop and something was €1, and instead you just paid €2 and you actually only got 80% of the thing, you wouldn't be very happy.
No.
If you went in and you like paid less and you got more, here's €1 and they gave you 2, buy 1 get 1 free.
Buzz.
You'd be fucking chuffed. Why don't we approach training the exact same way? All these little heuristics, if you will, of Rome wasn't built in a day but was built brick by brick, they're probably more useful to us than sports science. Because if you look at sports science to direct your training and then compare 2 training methods, how are they standardized? Well, we did these 2 different protocols and we standardized by going to failure. It's like, what? Just does not make sense. Or if you look at other studies, like there was one where it was endurance athletes and the effects of high rep strength training versus low rep strength training, except the upper limit for low rep strength training was 11 reps. So 1 to 11 reps was considered low rep. And then obviously high rep is above 12 reps. So if you were to have an equivalent rep range for the 12 rep plus group, it would be 12 to I think 132 reps. How do you standard, like,
What the fuck?
you're not comparing apples and oranges. You're comparing red apples to green apples. Like, they're the same thing. Two useless protocols. And they're also not ecologically valid. Or what's the word? Fuck. Cut this part out. They also don't represent what's actually being done, because nobody does that. Nobody's who actually knows what they're doing, or nobody who's actually doing good work and performing to the highest abilities without being injured all the time is going to failure in every single session.
No.
Whereas we standardize our interventions like this.
So, just bringing it back to we were starting on the training. We defined training. See, my brain needs to find a way to bring it back to what we were speaking about initially, and I'm struggling here. Don't put
Now you've a glimpse inside my head.
Yeah. So basically, the big takeaway from that, for me, and I've taken it away from the way you were coaching me before, but also all the stuff you've been putting up about the strength training. Getting specific on what actual strength training is very important.
So look at what you're doing, look at what you're trying to do. Look at what you're doing or what you're being told to do. Look at how you're doing that, and then look at the effects. So heavy is heavy. Heavy is slow. So it's going to move slowly if it's heavy. If it's genuinely heavy, it's going to move slow. If it doesn't move slowly, it's not heavy. Fast is light. It's going to be unloaded. It might even be accelerated using something like bands. Endurance, it's going to be relatively easy in terms of effort if you're going to go for a long period of time. And then see how you can do more of that over time. It's not rocket science. But that's really it. And go back to what things actually are. We've begged, borrowed, and stolen from every other sport to use in a completely different context. We're like pirates, but not like Blackbeard. We're more like these shit Somali pirates who board these massive oil tankers and don't know what to do when they get the fucking the massive ship. Like, they can't sell it. They can't do anything with that oil. No one's going to buy it off them, even if they did, even if they could do something with it.
Can't even go for a joyride.
Yeah, exactly. So they end up just getting a ransom for it or whatever. But our squats don't look like squats. Our hinges don't look like hinges. Our presses, I don't know what our presses look like, because nobody seems to press overhead anymore. We've just made so many small incremental changes to things over time that we're saying that A is B and B should be A.
And then the A is B and the B is A. In terms of the running training in GA, how do you see that being played out in terms of people's? You mentioned endurance there, and endurance should be relatively easy because you want to go for long periods of time. In terms of running, obviously there's two aspects to running, which is obviously your max speed, it's the speed element, and then obviously your endurance element, and then we can taking out change of direction and all that jazz. But
they're going to be the foundations for whatever it is, and I think that's you've brought us to a really good point that can help fix people's training, if you will, by spending most of your time at the extremes and then letting the middle take care of itself. Once you address the extremes, the middle is kind of take care of itself, especially when it comes to your sport-specific practice and how that training is, because people are more so in it for the love of the sport, and they might not have the understanding of the things that they maybe should be doing within that sport. If you're doing so many small-sided games in your session with very short rest periods in between them, it's not going to be fast enough that you're getting much of a speed kind of stimulus, but it's going to be too intense that you're not really getting those benefits that you would from pure endurance training.
And you're under too much fatigue to be getting much benefit in terms of change of direction, probably as well.
Probably, yeah. You probably haven't reached a high enough speed to then decelerate and then redirect yourself.
So, in that sense, for people, like on an individual basis, there's not going to be too many fucking GA managers listening to this, I don't think.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. These fucking pricks. What? But on an individual level, you said play like training to the extremes, and I fucking love the idea.
And I mean the extremes, because again, to rag on sports science, because it's something I love to do. Apparently, I don't actually mean to. I love science. It's just that sports science has become a bit of an abomination. We have this had this concept of high speed running that has massive sway, where high speed running has this threshold or this range. Then we've got sprinting, and then we have our average top speed. So high speed running, if you look at the research in GAA, is 17 miles an hour, which is like 4.72 meters per second. A snail's pace, relatively speaking. You're talking about running 100 meters in something like 18 seconds or something. I should actually get this figure here. I'll put a graph up on screen. I'll send it to Larry. But rugby is something like 4.5 meters per second, or 16 kilometers an hour. I saw another one. So you're talking about somewhere from 4.5 to 5 meters per second, which isn't fast by any stretch of the imagination, but it's called high speed running. And because 80% of the game is spent at high speed running, we need to accumulate this amount of meters in these speeds, and we end up spending all this time accumulating these meters within our sessions. So maybe we do 10 runs from the 21 meter line to the 21 meter line, which is approximately 100 meters, and we're going to do it in 16 to 18 seconds, which is within that high speed running kind of range. Just doesn't really make sense.
No, you're not getting up near top speed, and then also you were on a bit earlier about competing in testing, where there's going to be a lot of people there that's fucking super easy for, and then there's other people where that's going to be a little bit more challenging for. Like, obviously, hopefully it's not too challenging to get up to that for everybody. But
and then we've forgotten about another kind of elephant in the room there, where what determines your sub-maximal speed or is your maximal speed. So with a higher max speed, you've got a higher sub-max speed, and if it's a sub-max speed, you can sustain it longer, or you can repeat it more. So that's what I mean by addressing those extremes. So if you spend your time really hammering your speed and getting faster, being able to accelerate better, and then you also hit the other end of that spectrum of these accumulating these minutes, hours, and meters or kilometers at these RPE 2s, RPE 3s, and that's really, really easy. You should be able to have a conversation. We could actually do this podcast, probably doing a zone 2 session, because if we couldn't, we weren't really in that kind of zone. It was too hard. We've got all these things happening underneath the hood that we can't really measure, and we're trying to get these proxy measures from our heart rate monitors, but we can't get the full picture.
So our endurance training basically needs to be a lot easier.
And you want to accumulate an absolute metric fuck ton more of it. Walking's this is going to be a little bit controversial, I'd say, but I think walking's probably one of the more underrated ones, because you can accumulate so many kilometers over the course of a year.
Is this why you always do your stories when you're walking tag team
I
too?
actually haven't done any stories in a while. My steps have been in the gutter. But that goes back to what I said about earlier about different types of physical activity being foundations for others. So like general physical activity, just being generally physically active will allow you to do more exercise, which is fun, and/or training. Better training will also support testing and competing, and then training makes all the other things relatively easier as well. Now when it comes to getting the most out of it, we need to consider the cost of all the activities we're doing or all the training we're doing. So if we're doing an awful lot of sprinting, how much more on-feet conditioning can we do? How much more impact can we do, especially if we're doing our plyos like we should be? Shout out Matt Watson. But we definitely need to figure out how we can maximize it without paying too much for it. Just cost benefit, really. Like, spend more time on the bike, spend more time on the rower, ski or sleds maybe.
Yeah, I'm liking the heavy sled these days.
And like again, and then we've moved away from we've already moved away from endurance there.
Oh yeah.
But crawls is another good one. Just things that are relatively easy that you can do an awful lot of work with. Start being able to do longish jogs. I'm calling them jogs because when I say go for a long run, people like take it as a fucking race. Think they're fucking Kipchoge.
Yeah. I find it very hard to run very slow.
It's harder.
Yeah.
And that's one of the other difficulties that people don't really talk about, are the difficulty of being able to yield, being able to actually go at a lower intensity. It's really, really fucking hard.
So people need to stop going so fucking ham on their endurance training.
And go harder on their strength work. But by harder, I mean as in use more load.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to anything that's more speed oriented, move fucking faster. And it's the same idea when it comes to the limiter for all of our strength work will be our absolute strength. So that's where the most of your time should be. And that's going to be the limiter for most people. If you're an absolute freak of nature, like maybe Will Rattel, he's going to be better off spending a lot of his time maybe on things like the Olympic lifts because he's got such massive outputs. Whereas the likes of me, my time is going to be way better spent building or rebuilding my squat, deadlift, press, chin up, all those big exercises. And then when it comes to speed, it's the same idea. Your max speed is going to determine everything underneath that. Like, nobody cares about your speed endurance if you're slow as fuck. It just doesn't really matter.
Who cares about your 5k time?
I'd say Olympians do.
Unless if you're not a 5k Olympian, you don't care about your 5k time, should you?
Yeah, and you need to be able to cover the distance you cover within a game of football. So, club level GAA, you're talking about, we're going to say approximately 8 kilometers. 8 kilometers an hour. It's not exactly long. It's not exactly difficult to cover that in an hour. And you also have a break every 30 at 30 minutes.
And you have a break at point of the game as well.
Yeah.
Depending on position. But with one thing we didn't actually mention with obviously jumping is a part of GA. Obviously more so when they brought in the fucking mark. It's a more, not that it's not any more the game I don't think than it was before, but it can be a more useful skill to have to be a good jumper, to be able to pluck a ball.
Massive.
So we didn't actually touch on the jumping there, and I put up a meme there the other day, and I had a good few boys messaging me back. They were doing like box jumps in sets of 5 and 6. Like, going back to the strength thing, what is the purpose of jumping? Doing a box jump for most people is to jump higher.
Yeah, or what? It's a case of using the right tool for the right job. Like, the box jump is great because it eliminates the eccentric. Like, you don't have to worry about the landing. But being able to deal with the landing and being able to use that landing and use or transfer your horizontal speed into something vertical is going to be a massive role in how high you can jump and how easy it is for you to jump that height. So, again, you're paying more and getting less. Box jumps have a place. It's a very, very small place, and it's probably in the corner.
Even straight leg box jumps.
I like a straight leg box jump, but again, it's like, what is it good for apart from getting better at straight leg box jumps?
And yeah, you're never really going to get a static start when you're running. You're going to pluck a ball in GA, are you? If we're going down the sport specific route.
And then and so many people do their box jumps without arm action.
Or they do this, the wee arm out in front.
Yeah, and the stick, like, I'm going to stick this landing. Or worse yet, not worse yet. Like, I actually, if you were doing a box jump, I'd probably prefer to see people doing the whole landing in the bottom of a squat because it's actually more challenging.
Yeah, box jump overs. or like just any form of jumping over thing?
I don't.
know,
I
you
don't
know, hurdle jump over.
No, I don't like hurdles. I actually really dislike hurdles now. So if you think about what happens with a hurdle and what needs to happen, you need to jump over an object. You need to know where that object is so you don't hit it. So, few things happen. You're looking down, so you're looking down. You're probably more likely to land on your forefoot. Everyone seems to use the forefoot landings way too much in all of their plyos. Then to kind of get yourself over that hurdle, a lot of the time you'll just bring your knees up and then flick your heels back underneath you to get over the hurdles. Whereas what the hurdles are meant to be used for is to improve getting up higher, vertical forces.
So again, we're confusing what the purpose of the whole thing is again.
Yeah, pretty much.
So then,
like the beauty of plyos is the beauty of plyos, from what I've taken from Matt Watson just took what I thought I knew about plyos and destroyed it. But he's given me a much better model to use where you need zero equipment. Maybe some dumbbells. But sorry, Matt.
Or some of the fucking David
Wex things.
Yeah.
Pro pulsers. I'll get to try them
pulsers.
out in Australia, thankfully.
Yeah,
Thanks
shakes
as
and
a pair.
aura. So then you would go away completely from the jump training, because I like to make the difference between jump and plyometric. You'd probably be better at making that the difference in terms of definition.
Yeah, so I would classify them as, I would have them as two different parts of the whole that makes up training. And I think that's a good that's a good point, because it illustrates an idea we keep coming back to, that the whole is always greater than the sum of its parts, but the whole is dependent on those constituent parts. It's like a meal. So a meal is more than the ingredients, but if you don't have the ingredients, you can't make the meal. The quality of the ingredients determines the quality of the meal. Then you got the chef to think about. Or like, if the chef doesn't know how to put these ingredients together, what kind of meal are you going to end up with? And the way I see kind of a lot of training these days is that instead of going out and getting the ingredients we need, and not ignoring the quite obvious limiters to our performance, or learning how to make other dishes, we just make the same meal we always make. We never actually explore. And a lot of the dishes we love probably the most today are things that we've just happened upon, and it's a process of exploration, but there's a fundamental amount of knowledge, and that brings you to think that might be a good idea in the first place. Necessity is the mother of all invention. Like, who would have thought that chicken and waffles went together? Peanut butter and jam.
Mashed potato inside deep fried potato. Who would have thought that? Croquettes. There you go. And I forgot batter, obviously. Yeah. I did forget about a vital ingredient there. There we go.
And there's another kind of circular thing as well that we can keep coming back to.
Keep up them fibs.
Cut that. You already know everything you need to know about training. You just need to like zoom out from training. So you can think about that cooking example, or you can go to something like finances and money in, money out, compound interest, cost benefit, risk reward, all this stuff. You could go to farming. So farming's a really good one. So you've got different seasons are better for, you can plant different crops in different seasons. You can only plant that soil or that crop there. You can't plant two crops in the same part of the ground. It takes a certain amount of time. You've got a window that you need to plant it, and you've got a window you need to harvest it. If you miss the window to plant, you're kind of screwed.
And if it's raining, you have to change what you're doing.
And you probably need to, there's probably some upkeep required there in terms of pest control.
you're actually
and
very
pest
good.
control here is functional gurus.
Pest control. That's one thing that I think you and the boys that you're doing the seminars with are good at, is relaying back information to more general things. Well, I suppose it ties in with the fact that these are all about general physical
The
preparation.
GPP, yeah.
It's all a circle, isn't it?
Because like as soon as you stop playing your sport, it's no longer general, or it's no longer it's no longer specific. There is no such thing as specific training. But there's also no such thing as general training either, because training by its nature has to be specific. So it could easily have been called SVP, the SVP seminar, because training is specific. It's just general relative to the sport.
There you go. But what if somebody is training with what they think is a specific purpose, but they're not training specifically? They're training more generally. Is it general or is it specific?
I'm sorry, what?
If somebody is training with the intention of thinking that they're training specifically, let's say,
As in I'm doing quarter squats because it's sport specific.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's just not a thing. The reason partial range of motion squats are valuable is because they allow you use more fucking load. That's it. Sure, there's probably something there with regards to the joint angles, but that's a side effect or a byproduct of using more load. And the less range of motion you use, the less distance the load has to travel. So the more load you can use. And the more load you can use, the more force and so on.
Boom.
More strain.
I think it is an ideal time to segue into your preference. Well, not your preference, but you've been using a lot of partial range of motion squats in terms of your own training for the last wee while. I think around when you had your Achilles tendinopathy.
Yeah, so this is another good point with regards to what training is and where it deviates from something like rehab. So originally it wasn't even the Achilles tendinopathy when I first started actually properly using and
ACL,
training partial range of motion squats. It was the ACL tear, and I did not. I wanted to continue to train my lower body. I wanted to continue to stay in touch with movements like the squat, but I also did not want to risk it by moving through full ranges of motion. And I knew that I could use more load through partial ranges of motion. And in the later stages of this, I was practically okay to do almost anything. I think I was probably even cleared past all the return to play tests by then. But I was videoing how to measure your vertical jump with a box that had the height written on the side, and you set up your camera at the height of the box, and you knew how far back from the box you were. But I was doing this in between my partial range of motion squats. It was the first time I remember I ever had 250 kilos in my front rack and stood it up, and it was a lot lower than the partials you see me doing now. And then I went back and did another vertical jump, and all the vertical jumps had maximal intent, but this one was about 7 centimeters, maybe more, higher than the others, and I was just like, that was weird. I was like, how could I jump that much higher? Like, did I really just have that in me? Did I just use post-activation potentiation, PAP? And it kind of, I kept going with that, and it helped tremendously. On my first full clean session back, I was cleaning my old max, and it was easy because I didn't intend to push it. I had no idea where I was. It was my first session back doing full cleans, so I was like, okay, let's spend some time here. And I was like, that was ridiculously easy. Let's spend some time. Oh, that was ridiculously easy. And I was like, right, well, I'm definitely not going past. I'm not going to go too far, but I ended up matching my old PB, I think, in my first or second, maybe it was my second session back. I kind of parked partial squats then for a long time, and my Achilles tendinopathy reared its ugly head in the summer. Struggled to walk the day after. Couldn't really seem to get myself back into any rhythm with my training, and for whatever reason, I decided to do some pin partials. I think it was because I had the GA team doing them, because I found them beneficial for plyos. and I did them, and I was like, my Achilles feels okay. So I did some plyos, and I could do the plyos, whereas I couldn't do anything the day before. As soon as I started to do anything fast, it just hurt. And it just kind of went from there. I did something like 320 from a relatively high height, maxed that out in and around 320. Then I just shortened the range one more, which was the shortest possible range of motion. And since then, I've done 410. And again, I haven't seen a point.
That's kilos, not pounds, by the way.
Yeah, and I did 410 because it's 900 pounds. And it's the most I could fit on the barbell. Couldn't fit any more on the barbell, so there are no more weights. But I expected to see a point of diminishing returns because it's not very convenient or practical to load and unload that many plates. To work up to that weight takes time. And I was kind of hoping that I'd see this point of diminishing returns, to be honest with you, but I didn't. And the GA lads pushed it a lot further than I thought they could or would either, because they were only doing 10 minutes. So they're doing 10 minutes of partial squats from pins using a Zercher because the front rack wasn't a viable option, and a lot of them aren't very comfortable with a barbell on their back. And because I'm dealing with 30 lads in the gym of all varying levels, varying wants to push the weight as well, like I'd be like, come on lads, add a little bit of load. There's a few lads in the power rack that I know are pushing it, that I know that they've worked up to around 220, 230 in the past. So I'm kind of confident in their ability, and I don't think they're going to go too outrageously far. And after a session, I counted it, and I think 3 or 4 of them did 260. Others did 250. Zercher, like that's a lot harder than doing a front rack or back rack Zercher. I was astounded. But 10 minutes, that's all we're spending, 10, 15 minutes, 15 minutes max from empty bar to 260 and doing a set of plyos in between.
And you're complaining about 60 kilos across your arm, you soft cunt.
With a bar pad.
Oh man, I love Zerchers. Zerchers is a good test to test people where their heads at in terms of being able to tolerate discomfort.
Yeah, and the Zercher, like everything, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So the positioning of the Zercher, it encourages them to figure out where their pelvis should be. It's very difficult to like have your ribs open, so ribs stacked over your pelvis, knees are forward, pushing through a flat foot, and that's the beauty of the partial squat, and it's such a short range of motion partial squat. It's the antithesis of your pogo leap, so it's extremely heavy, so it's extremely slow. You need maximal tension throughout the whole exercise versus the pogo leap where you're relaxed in the air, you're managing your tension a little bit differently. You have to pronate the foot a little bit more. You need to get those hips underneath that barbell. Head position, everything. All these small things seem to add up to this massive benefit to something that's completely different. And again, opposites attract. All these little sayings are probably more useful than the rules we've been given.
But the one thing you mentioned about those partials, and I've played with myself, I've played with it, some of the people I coach as well, and you mentioned that like it's a good reference point, you know, to feel that level of force into your feet, you know, when you're in a partial range of squat or partial squat. You know.
Yeah, and it's probably an insult to squats to call them a squat, but that's the only thing I can
partial
call
dip.
them. Yeah, and even that it probably actually is a partial dip. It's probably a shorter range of motion than a dip in a jerk or a push press. But yeah, and it goes back to like if you were to look at a pogo leap and improve your pogo leap, how are you going to improve your pogo leap when you're moving that quickly? You can't
can't think your way into this.
You can't make small minute changes to it as you hit the ground. So if your ground so I know this because I use my 240 frames per second and counted the frames to see how long I was spending on the ground. So depth jumps, and it was comparing dumbbell depth jumps to body weight or unloaded depth jumps. 0.15 seconds on the floor. So that's my ground contact times were 0.15 seconds.
Without the weight.
It was weight down without, up to like 3 kilos.
Oh.
And then even with 10 kilos, it was 0.248. So it was still technically a plyometric. But it's you can't make those small adjustments to your technique because it's just so quick.
Mm. And even, like, I know clean isn't as quick maybe as a plyo, but it's a quick movement. But I've fucking I've been guilty of trying to think my way into changing something while doing it. But you can't, once you start going, you're not going to be able to think your way into adjusting something on the fly to a degree.
Exactly. And if you think about your reflexes as well and where these signals come from, we can't be thinking about things as we're doing them. Overthinking them is a very real problem. And that's one of the reasons that I use time singles, where it gets people out of their head. You're like, there's enough time to recover, enough time to actually repeat what you've just done, but it's not enough time to overthink your technique. It's not enough time to spend too long on a perfect setup either. So when I start coaching somebody, they'll start unracking a barbell, and there's one guy at the minute, and I think it took him 10 seconds to get ready, do his squat, and put the barbell back in. I was like, I don't know how he's actually finished that set of however many reps it was. I think it was 20 reps, like every 30 seconds for 20 total reps. But every rep was taking him 10 seconds to do one. Whereas I showed him a demo of me doing it, where it's unrack the bar, 2 steps out, down, up, back in, 4 seconds maybe. So he's taking 2.5 times as long to do that. So if we can figure out ways that you have to get out of your head because you're not going to accomplish the task. Or task over everything is something that me and Chris talk about in our seminars. And it's a reason that I really like the split Olympic lifts with the hops, because with the split Olympic lifts, you need to get that foot out in front and you need to whip it into the ground. And if you look at some good sports science...
there's good sports science?
Oh, there is. It's very rare. Don't know how rare it is.
Like the white dog shit?
Yeah, like the white dog shit.
If anybody sees white dog shit, take a picture, send it to us.
Don't send it to me. So it's Ken Clark and the 2M model when it comes to speed. So and the determinants of speed and how hard you can hit the ground is a massive determinant of your speed. Which, when we think about the split clean and a hop, we want to attack the ground and hit the ground hard with our foot. And we can connect these kind of dots across all these different parts of training. And it's just about using the right tool for the right job. And if you can if we recognize that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, but one of the constituent parts is the limiter. To improve that limiter, you kind of need to emphasize that limiter by deconstructing it. But if you deconstruct something, you must put it back together.
So we are a lot of us are using the wrong tools and are trying to think our way into...
We're probably not using the wrong tools, we're just using them for the wrong jobs.
And we're trying to think our way into doing things right instead of maybe adjusting the tool that we're using.
Yeah. Because if you just use more appropriate... if you have more appropriate exercise selection, constraint selection, the specific variation of that exercise, chances are you can do it well enough to get your desired effect. It's processes and outcomes, causes and effects. And if you're using process A but you want outcome B, you might need to find a different... Sorry, right, cut that fucking shit out. But if it's processes and outcomes, oftentimes we just hammer away at the same old processes, expecting different outcomes, and everybody is using the same processes. But then then we see someone come along and do something that's never been done before, whether it's Roger Bannister breaking 4 minutes for the first time, or Jakob Ingebrigtsen earlier on this year breaking the 2-kilometer world record, I think it was. Both of those are really good examples of doing something different and using different processes. And what are they getting? Different outcomes. Again, it's not exactly, I don't think it's rocket science. I don't think it's revolutionary. I actually don't think I'm very smart. I just think it's kind of painfully obvious that different processes lead to different outcomes. And if you want different outcomes that have never been seen before, you probably have to figure out processes that haven't been used before and tweak them. Aaron Rodgers is a great example at the minute. He tore his Achilles September 11th, had his surgery on September 13th, and was looking like he was going to be cleared to play for the Christmas Eve game had the Jets still been in contention. Who knows if he would have played, and he admitted that he wouldn't have been 100%, and his critics are having a field day with this at the minute. But to be even having the conversation about returning,
man, I would have been fucking buzzing to be able to
12
walk
weeks.
without fucking issues at 12 weeks. Now, I didn't get the surgery, but like fucking...
He was cleared to return to football activity after 77 days after surgery. Obviously, a few screws loose. I know he's his own man with a few kind of people say controversies, but I've grown to love him over the last couple of years.
Yeah. It's the ayahuasca, man. I'm telling you, that's what it was.
It probably was. It's a very apt hat for that. With poor man's Craig Jones. This guy's shit at jiu-jitsu though.
Terribly. Definitely not second best.
And then there's another Achilles example. I think it's just as mad. Carlos Nassar in weightlifting. He tore his Achilles back in May, I think. He just lifted a world record in a clean and jerk.
What the fuck?
Outlifted, I think, the 2 categories above him. I wonder what else has gone into that recovery. But one of the videos of him at the World Championship, so he just, because of the way weightlifting is in the Olympics, he needed to weigh in to be able to qualify for the Olympics. So he was in the training hall and training, and he's doing pretty massive weights. September, if he got injured in May, he got the surgery maybe in May, so June, July, August. So 3 months later, he's in a training hall doing the full lifts at pretty high intensities. They're not world record levels, but still pretty high intensities. I am kind of skeptical about that whole injury, given the circumstances. But apparently, he slipped and a sink fell and severed his Achilles. I don't know.
What the fuck?
Yeah, didn't know that could happen.
Yeah, interesting. But so we've gone through a lot of talk about training, processing outcomes. We've talked about a lot of different characteristics of training, and basically, now the next thing I'm going to ask of you is to detail what a session would look like if Cian was in charge of an entire team. Well, obviously you do the S&C with the team. So what would a session look like? Obviously you can give us a context of what the goal of that training session is, because obviously training needs to have a goal. But the reason why I'm doing this is because we're talking a lot about the theory, and there may be a lot of people listening to this that aren't coaches. There will be some coaches, but also just putting it into practical terms about how some of these thoughts and things go into action. You know, you can take us from what a session would be from start to finish, whatever you want, whatever fucking goal, whatever outcome you're looking for in a session. It's entirely up to you. You can be a pitch-based session, be a fucking gym session. You do you. And it's pre-season. And then we're going to go to in-season.
This is actually quite tough to think of a session, like as in a singular session, because the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Of course.
But I think if you've got a team, you're probably going to have to make a few groups.
2 or 3 sessions if you've wanted to.
So I'm just saying, if you got a team of, we're going to say 30 players, so you're a good, strong town team like ourselves. So maybe
nicking players from neighbouring villages.
you can absolutely not. we're there on a history. 31 titles since 1956.
Fair.
I think it's 31 anyway. We lose count.
That's not was unintentional.
But anyway, so you probably want to start off by, because training is specific, there's something you're trying to achieve, and what you're trying to achieve is meet the needs of the players. And because you've got 30 players, there's going to be massive differences between those players, so you're going to have some way to categorize those players. Maybe it's by maybe it's got a couple of different levels. So you've got training experience. So we've got 1-2 lads that would be extremely competent in the gym, and that's probably it. And even those guys, they might have been given a few ideas that might be a lot less true than they've been told. Then you've got older versus younger players. You've got players with more and less free time. You've got more air quotes dedicated players to the physical aspect of the game. You've got players that are more skillful and probably get away with lesser physical capacities, if you will, or capabilities. So once you've got that out of the way and you kind of know what the goals are, it's a case of finding an entry point. So you just pick a few exercises. You'd pick a few exercises, including sprinting, accelerating, all that kind of stuff in there, and you try to improve those over time. So you'd find an entry point, but let's make it.
Would you do a full session for acceleration, let's say, for example?
It depends.
It depends, obviously.
A full session for acceleration.
Or let's say sprint and like max speed and acceleration.
Right. I'll actually just do what I did. I'll tell you what I did. Even though I think it could be done a lot better. So we had two primary days we alternated between. We had one day that was relatively short ranges of motion, paired with, and that was very heavy, partial ranges of motion, zercher squats from pins. The idea there was to build up to max or near maximal load for one repetition. Yes, singles. This was done off season, in season, for the whole year essentially. There was a couple of changes, 2 or 3 changes across the course of the year that we rotated exercises in and out, different variations. So that was our very heavy exercise, and that was paired with pogo leaps, split pogo leaps, and so on. That was air quotes top speed day. Then the players would go out on the field, and then they would do some flying tens. So they would build up to from the end line to the end of the D, and then from the end of the D they would they would hopefully be able to be at top speed, and then they would go past the 45 and decelerate. That was day 1. Day 2 was acceleration focus, and they would do a lunge variation, a split clean variation, a hop variation, and with the lunge variation we paired in some half kneeling accelerations, used some bands, because if we use bands or load it slows the movement, so we can move a bit more precisely, and we can probably correct movement. You can be more aware of it and aware of what you're doing and what you might be doing right, what you might be doing wrong, and then they go out into the field and they do accelerations. Most of the accelerations were done as races, because a lot of the time the best way to improve outputs is to beat fuckers.
Competition.
Yeah.
Fucking class.
Then there you got your competition, you got your testing, you got your training.
There we go, all full circle, baby.
Yeah. But I don't want to do that essentially, because they're doing that on the same day that they have their Gaelic football training.
Right.
And they're doing it before their Gaelic football training. So they've got 30 minutes essentially of physical training, and then they go in and do their actual football training.
Well, it seems like we mentioned earlier about how you like those reference points, and that I like the way you structure sessions where it is like, I know you've spoken about it before, where you're going from easier to more complex, and it's a good way to structure things, especially with these more not that running's complex, but getting faster. Like, it can be a fucking, well, bringing the competition in, it takes, I think, mind out of it a little bit.
And what do we usually see when it comes to improving, or what do we usually see people do with the goal of improving their running and their sprint performance? It's these low level running drills of perfect arm action, and they're a cancer. But again, it's time and a place and right tool for right job. It makes some of the stuff that I've been trying to do less effective or completely ineffective, because you can't go north from the North Pole. So they're already in this position where that's where they need to get to. So you can't go somewhere you already are. You need to be away from it. And if you just let the body figure itself, if you let the person figure it out themselves, your body will self-organize into these positions. They will figure out that there are better ways to do it, especially when you see that, oh, Darren is fucking beating me. I can't have Darren beating me. So you've got some motivation to actually beat Darren. The amount of time you have evidence that what you're doing isn't working, so maybe you implicitly try something differently, and because you see that, oh well, I did something on that one, it's going to repeat that. You might not even know what you've done. The chances are you don't really know what you've done, but you've done something differently, and then that slowly becomes the pattern you choose, or the strategy you use. Yeah,
I'm going to do that again. Well, I think it's good for people to see how you would maybe structure, and that what training before training or after training, if depending on what your training time is at. I think that's a fucking good strategy for a lot of fucking teams to go for, just in the sense of creating more of an ethos of training. Because I've seen a lot of teams where, like, you get a lot of them where some of them train, the ones that are interested in training will train, but if it becomes a more, a thing of like, right, we're going to train after training, or we're going to train before training, obviously depending on what you're doing, better or worse before or after. But that in general, I think is a good strategy for people,
I think
as a team basis.
I think it fills the need, but again, I think it could be much better. And the thing about GAA, the GAA in a way has a lot of parallels with CrossFit, if you will, where a lot of questionable methods might still bring about, and I think CrossFit has a lot less of these questionable methods these days, but still brings about really good outcomes, and a lot of it comes down to effort. I don't think many GAA players don't want to train. It's just that the idea of what training is in their head has just been skewed a little bit, and they're lacking that. They can't connect those dots. They don't see that, oh well, this improves what I do out there, which makes it easier. I'm a better team player. I get to score more points. I'm a better defender, and so on. And in the past as well, so they also have very good reasons for not putting in the effort in the gym, because in the past when they've done it, they've either ended up injured, they've either ended up sore, or they have never seen a transfer to it on the pitch. The problem is that year after year they come back and they have to do it, and telling someone to do something just doesn't seem to really work very well.
No, you need to show them why it's what's important, but I'd say you need early evidence as well that it's actually having some impact.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to something else that it might be a grand unifying theory or something, or that's kind of what's proposed as predictive processing, where you're continuously making predictions about your environment. Like, why aren't you wearing a bathing suit right now, Darren? Because you didn't think you were going to go swimming, but you didn't have to consciously ask yourself, am I going swimming today? It's also fucking freezing. But we're making all these small predictions on a micro level, and we learn from our experiences. So we're just building these banks of evidence, whether we know it or not. So we need to find evidence, and you either get the evidence directly through your experiences, or you're given the evidence. And I don't know about you, but I'm kind of skeptical of what I'm being told.
Most of the time, yeah.
Yeah.
You need your first-hand evidence. Now, just because we've got about 4 minutes before we got to get the fuck out of here, we're going to rush into the rapid fire. Now, I'm going to try and curtail you on this. Now, it's not so much rapid fire, but it's a few things that I know that you are a fan of, or you've spoken about, that I'd like you to, literally whatever comes to your head, first thing, or the 27th thing that comes into your mind, whichever you choose. All right, and we're going to discuss it briefly. We already talked that down.
There's no blood in my finger.
Full foot landings. Why are they important? Quick.
Again, it comes back to using the right tool for the job. Oftentimes you end up on your forefoot because it's a conscious thing, or because maybe you're looking down. So when you go back to hurdles, that when you're jumping over a hurdle, you're looking down to see where that hurdle is. You point your toe down towards the ground. When you hit the ground with your forefoot, the heel is going to have to lower. The shin is then going to have to move forward. So you're lengthening your ground contact times. When we talk about plyos, we're trying to shorten. You're kind of trying to use short ground contact times, less than 0.25 seconds. So you're making it easier by full foot landings. And plyos by their nature are slower. A lot of the plyos we use have a vertical emphasis, so we're trying to put force down into the ground, and it's less about the horizontal. So full foot landings make sense. You can whip your foot into the ground a lot more because you've got a greater surface area to contact the ground with. Dan Pfaff has got some really good stuff on this, and I've got a really long post on this on Instagram, but I've got the working memory of a goldfish, so I'm going to refer you to that post.
Now, this may be, a little bit out of the ballpark. I had the theory that the fact that I would have been very forefoot landing in a lot of my plyometrics, and it's the fucking niggling thought in my head about my Achilles, that would that have been the contributing factor, and I started doing more forefoot running whenever I was trying to do sprinting, and it's been a fucking thing that's like in the back of my head. I tend to always land on my forefoot when I'm cleaning without fucking.
If you're landing on your forefoot when you're cleaning, you're kind of fucked.
But if a lot of the reps where I'd end up landing on my heel kind of is coming off the floor. I know, obviously you can go down a rabbit hole of thinking what the fuck caused this here, but there was a lingering thought in my head. I actually never mentioned to you, but I thought now is a good time.
You can't reduce things. You can't reduce injuries down like this. There could be a contributing factor. We'll never know. It's more likely your tolerance to sprinting and plyos from your what's the word? Your break from training for a couple of years a while back, and just the compounding interests of that. It wasn't really a break; it was more of a holiday, we'll say.
When did I take a break from training?
Early London days.
Well, I probably stopped doing like a lot of athletic stuff
and explosive stuff.
Explosive stuff, like that's a big thing as well.
Like I removed a lot of, so with my Achilles tendinopathy, I think a massive contributing factor was my relative lack of Olympic weightlifting, because I had got rid of them to try address some of my limiters, aka my squat, etc. And there's a massive an underrated propulsive element in those Olympic lifts, being able to push down forcefully into the ground through your forefoot. Landing on my forefoot was a massive contributor for my shin splints. Again, smaller surface area, crippling shin splints. But yeah, it could be a contributing factor. But again, there's no point in crying over spilled milk.
That's it. Tears are done, boy.
Yeah.
The tears are done.
And the tears are done.
Hey. When are we taking the
ayahuasca, the frog venom,
the toad venom?
toad venom. With that hat, it looks like I think I've already taken it. No, I don't know. Like, I would be interested. So I'm interested in the idea of it.
If you've never heard of toad venom, there's a video on Vice where
White women
go and take toad venom, which is a psychedelic. But we were after we went out for a few drinks for my 30th, myself, you and Mark were sitting on the couch watching this video.
I don't think I ever would. Like, I'm so afraid of anything like that. Terrified.
Yeah.
But I know someone who's done the whole ayahuasca thing, like, and gone deep down, and she's in Mexico at the minute. Right. And I have a feeling I'd probably bet that she might have done it while she's there. I'll ask her.
Fair play though. Yeah, I don't know if I'd be up for taking toad venom, but sure, look.
As long as you get the smoker from a crack pipe.
A few mushies be grand. Now,
that was a shy question, but anyway.
It was a shy question.
Cut it.
Yeah, cut it out. Well, then there's no point in having this one. Then we'll cut that out as well.
Those references. Next question.
The devil is in the dose.
The dose make it the poison. Yeah, so there's no inherently bad exercise. If you're like, spinal flexion was a big one. Now more people are okay with flexing your spine, but if flexing your spine was bad, you can't do so many activities in life.
Can't pick up a ball off the floor while you're playing Gaelic football.
It's a case of a lot of the a part of a lot of the ideas I think I might have shared, I don't know, but probably comes back to just letting the body do what the body does. Stop overriding the body's reflexes and the body's natural tendencies.
Simples.
Yeah.
And we're going to wrap it up there, folks. Thank you very much for episode number 2, Cian. I hope this all came together nicely in a nice wee... Oh, in the middle camera, Lally. This all came together in a nice wee pie for you fuckers, whether it's training, GA, whether you're coaching, whatever the fuck you're into. I hope this was of interest to you. Go follow the Cian fella at Cian0 on the Brian.
Yeah.
No underscore. Cian0 Brian.
Brien.
Boom. And yeah, follow, like the podcast.
And
go
get
follow
a flight
himself
to Australia for the GPP seminars.
Yeah, or just wait till he does another one over this neck of the woods. Right, good luck.